One of the exercises that's been very helpful to my patients is to write a letter when they've been mistreated or abused by a parent, to write an unmailed letter, not to mail it to the person, but just to write a letter, "Dear Dad," for example, and put down all your thoughts and emotions about that person, both good and bad, so that you can, by expressing emotions in words, they don't need to be expressed via your body in the form of symptoms. But not everybody's ready for that right off the bat. One of my patients put me off for a year and a half. And even after the year and a half, she tells me, "Look, I'm getting tired of you pushing me to write this letter to my dad. So I'll make a deal with you. I will write 2 paragraphs to my dad, but you have to promise you're never going to ask me to do it again." And I knew she had a very troubled relationship with her father. And I also knew that 2 paragraphs wasn't going to be nearly enough verbal expression of emotion to alleviate her very significant symptoms. But she was just insistent. So I said, "Okay, if that's the best you can do, I'll respect that, and I'll make the deal with you." So off she went to write her 2 paragraphs. And she told me what happened when she came back for her follow-up visit, which was that after the 2nd paragraph, she wrote a 3rd paragraph. And then after that, she wrote a 4th paragraph. And then she couldn't stop. And she ended up with 9 single-spaced typewritten pages. And her physical symptoms were 90% better after that. But she had to get to the point where she was ready. And everybody's different.
Yeah, no, interesting. Well, also, too, if you realize, let's say, I don't know, your parents are abusing you and you internalize it as your fault, I guess even recognizing that's not enough. You still have to believe it with at least part of your being, or maybe all of your being, and then the healing can come. So I guess maybe that's why there's a lag, and sometimes multiple therapy sessions are required.
Yeah. What we're talking about is rewiring the brain. In a research program called the Boulder Back Pain Study, they actually saw this with magnetic resonance imaging, that even after as little as 8 sessions of pain relief psychology, the brains physically changed in people who had an average of 10 years of chronic low back pain. And the pain, in relation to that, the pain was relieved in most patients. They had an average pain score of 4 out of 10 before they got the treatment. And 4 weeks later, after the treatment, the average pain score was 1. And something like 2/3 of the patients, the pain score was 0 or 1 out of 10. I mean, it was a dramatic improvement after, 10 years of constant pain. But the brains were physically changed. But it takes time to do that. And the rate at which the brains can rewire themselves is different for everybody.
Okay. So what's the refinement and the process been like? Like when you first conceived of this and tried it and it had success, I'm sure you were elated. I'm sure the patients were too.
Yeah.
Yeah, was it improved over time?
Well, Dr. Kaplan gave me the original framework for how to think about this. And I just assumed when I got to Portland, Oregon, to be in private practice, that there would be another Dr. Kaplan or 2 or 3 of them here in town that could take over these patients as soon as I identified the issue. But there weren't any. Mostly it was cognitive behavioral therapy, which isn't nearly good enough for these patients. And most of them came back and said, I tried it. It didn't work. Now what do we do? And so there was nobody else. So I started to help them myself, building on the framework, improving the framework. But it took me, I was climbing the learning curve for probably a good 4 or 5 years at a rate of 250 or 300 patients a year before I felt like, okay, I know what I'm doing.